As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We have an important returning guest today, Andy Hoffman, Marketing Director for Miles Franklin and well-known commentator on the precious metals markets, is back with us here again on Reluctant Preppers. Andy, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. A return guest in more than one way, since this will be our second taping this morning.
Yeah, we had some technical difficulties earlier. I'm glad we were able to reconnect on this historic day of Trump's presidential inauguration. Our previous conversation came before the event. Now that he has just been inaugurated, the question remains that we asked you earlier is what areas can a President Trump actually make a difference in for reducing risk of a collapse and a calamity that would impact our people severely, versus where are there fundamental realities where we're past the point of no return?
Well, let's put it this way. Back in 2008, when I was voraciously supporting Ron Paul, that was 2008, when we had half the debt we have now, and currencies weren't crashing, and all the kind of things that the world is dealing with now, all the social and political revolutions. Back then, I thought it was inevitable that we'd have a major economic and financial calamity. And I thought, even if Ron Paul gets in, there's nothing that he could even do other than to be a good custodian from the current status quo, which is dying, to the next status quo, which could be a long and dangerous and difficult time. But I think a real true diplomat, someone who knows what the right things to do are and how to speak to people, would be the best thing that the nation could have. Now, again, here we are 8 years later, and the financial situation, economic, political, social, monetary, you name it, is far worse than it was back then. And still, my thought is the best America would be able to do is to have some kind of diplomat that would get us through what's coming and make the right decisions. Now, clearly, Hillary Clinton was the worst imaginable choice for this role, because we probably, it's Inauguration Day an hour ago, we'd probably be at war with Russia by now if she was president. So in that respect, that's a positive. Then again, he's initiating trade wars and currency wars and political wars with just about everyone, from the car makers to the nations of Mexico and Germany and China. So, I'm as worried as I've ever been about the state of the country. And as far as, the Trumpflation expectations of tax cuts and stimulus, it's all BS. There's absolutely nothing behind it. It's not politically or economically viable. Repealing Obamacare, all those kind of things, people are going to realize very quickly that none of that is viable. And most of what he wants to do is not even good for America, even if he could do it.
You mentioned some of the megatrends that are so fundamentally established that they remain. What are some of those main? What are some of the main risk factors that you see that are looming over us still?
The biggest factor is the debt. I mean, we talk about the giant pink elephant in the room, which gets gianter and pinker every day. I mean, to think that George Bush doubled our debt and then Obama just doubled our debt, and even, these so-called great plans that Trump has, they're admitting that they're going to cause a massive increase in debt, and let alone if interest rates rise, none of this is even possible. But, to try to consider having massive inflationary policies at a time where you have record debt to start with is a recipe for disaster. So, I'm lost track of the question for a second. But basically,
you mentioned unpayable debt.
Yeah, the megatrend is the debt. The megatrend is the debt. It has to go bigger. Look, the definition of a Ponzi scheme is something that must grow larger to survive, and it must grow larger exponentially so and maintain confidence while it's getting larger. And that's what the Fiat Ponzi scheme is. That's creating all of this debt. There's no way that you can pay the debt, and there's no way you can even slow down the pace of the debt. And that's the biggest mega trend out there. The second one, of course, is the fact that the currencies themselves are falling apart. I mean, most fiat currency regimes last only about 3 or 4 decades, and now we're into our 5th decade, and you're seeing serially currencies getting crushed. Look at today, the pound, the Mexican peso. Across the board, we're talking about currencies getting crushed. And last but not least is the demographics, which is slowly but surely sinking its teeth into the Western world. Japan, Germany, the United States, you name it, even China. The demographics are so bad that even if there were policies that were favorable put into place, they would still be swamped by this tsunami of demographics. Whereas, again, it's a Ponzi scheme, Social Security, Medicaid, all these things. There's just too many people out there that need things and too little people giving things. And that's why you get more draconian government actions as we move towards socialism and communism and fascism, to sate the growing thirst of these needy people.
In response to the anticipation of a Trump presidency, there was, you said in the past, unprecedented amount of doubling down and intervention to suppress precious metals prices. Could we turn our attention to gold and silver? What has been going on for the past quarter or so, and what do you see changing now, and what do you see ahead for 2017?
Look, I've had a what I call manipulation mantra going on. I think I muttered it to myself back in 2005, each day worse than the last. And again, it all goes back to this Ponzi scheme. The only way to keep the game going is for the manipulation to grow exponentially. It just can't stop. It has to get worse to the point where we now have all-time high valuations of financial assets in the Western world at a time where we have all-time low fundamentals, and the opposite goes for precious metals. I would say that arguably, on a quantitative or qualitative basis, we now, because of the suppression, have the lowest valuations relative to, the amount of money printed, the supply-demand fundamentals, the future outlook for monetary printing, all that, than we've ever had. So how long can it go? I mean, it's a difficult question, but it's clearly, I've talked about forever the last-to-go markets, meaning the manipulations are starting to fail no matter how much they do. All this QE that they've done and negative interest rates, it's failing serially around the world. You're seeing currencies collapse. A lot of bond markets have been collapsing. A lot of stock markets are doing terribly, particularly in local currency terms. And that's with a record amount of manipulation. So they're going to keep ramping it up and ramping it up. A perfect example would be the post-election where, the powers that be had it all set up for Hillary Clinton to win, and then when she didn't, they said the only way we're going to save the system is if we double down and try to put a facade on this Trump victory, which is, as I predicted beforehand, at Brexit times 10, and make it look like it's not so bad. And all that's done is created even bigger bubbles that have to burst, certainly in real terms and probably nominal terms as well.
In face of this suppression, what do you see as the actual underlying supply and demand dynamics for gold and silver for the year going forward and the decade going forward?
The supply-demand right now, as we speak, has never been tighter, particularly in the eastern part of the world and the third world, where currencies have gotten absolutely destroyed. I mean, central banks are buying as much as ever. The Chinese are buying as much as ever. The Indians, for all they say, are probably buying close to as much as ever, and they're certainly going to be buying silver if they have difficulty buying gold. And the biggest issue out there, which I've been discussing for some time, what we're talking about, this manipulation for so many years has absolutely destroyed the mining industry. And the mining industry for gold and silver, there's a reason why they call them precious metals. They are very scarce. It's not like oil where the price goes up and there's always technology that brings more supply to market like shale. And gold and silver, all of the low-hanging fruit has been found. In fact, I've now been in the sector. In May, it'll be 15 years. And I remember about 5 years ago, I wrote an article called "The Only Major Gold Discovery in This Bull Market Gone Goodbye," because it was a discovery in Ecuador in about 2005 or 6, and to this day it still hasn't been produced because the government of Ecuador is asking for like a 70% royalty. So that's the only one in 15 years. There's been no major discoveries, and as a result, you're seeing the reserves have been plunging. I think they're down 40% in the last 5 years alone. CapEx is down. The development costs have exploded. A lot of the mining companies have gone bankrupt or are very spotty balance sheets, and of course they're scared because the prices have never been able to sustain high levels, and for the most part they're not economic. So as a result, I've been saying for some time that you're going to see a dramatic decline in production, and sure enough, I just wrote an article a few weeks ago called "The Most Bullish chart, gold precious metal chart you'll ever see, showing how the mainstream, I think it was S&P, is now forecasting a 20+% decline in gold production over the next decade. I have no doubt that it's going to be the same with silver. And as a result, I mean, can you imagine what the demand will be 10 years from now when pretty much all of the fiat currencies in the world have been destroyed, and we have 20% less supply out there, and all the people like us who hold it have no intention at all of selling? So again, supply demand is going to be tighter in the coming decade than ever before.
In the face of that reality, when do you perceive, and what would be examples of where the physical demand could overwhelm the manipulations, which are admittedly doubling down, and yet in the face of a rising market?
Well, I mean, where? It's a global market, right? So it's just the question is more a matter of when. There's just too many central banks now that are buying, particularly the Chinese, the Russians. And there's too little people. There's no, all the weekends that there were going to be, whether it's in the scrap market or the sell your jewelry market, or just the holders like us, the strong end holders like us. All those people are going to sell have sold already, and there's not a lot of supply coming. So I got to think it's it's as close as it's ever been before. I was just looking, the other day. There's this website that shows the disparity of the Chinese gold and silver prices, and since the post-election smash, they've been enormous. In silver, they're bordering some of the biggest shortages we've had since 2013 and 11. It's still like $1.30 more per ounce to get an ounce of silver in China as it is here. So you're seeing shortages show up in certain parts of the world. We haven't seen it here. In large part because the stock market has been goosed and people have lost their focus on it temporarily. But around the world, there's record demand. I mean, the price of gold in nearly every currency right now is either at, near, or in many cases well above previous all-time highs.
Speaking of the stock market being goosed, you mentioned that, for example, in Japan, which is several years ahead of us in that game, how that plays out and how it talks about the supply and demand balance. Can you clue us in on looking ahead to the future of what happens when you keep trying to goose the stock market? What ends up happening?
Well, we're talking about, people say, well, there'll be a stock market crash. And you say, well, my answer is no in nominal terms, because for the most part, they can goose it forever. I mean, look at the Japanese, the Swiss. I mean, these are central banks that are overtly buying stocks, and even the United States has discussed it, and ECB has discussed it. So theoretically, even if the real rates of return fall because all this money printing creates inflation, they could nominally hyperinflate. I mean, look at the Venezuelan stock market; it's done fantastic. Zimbabwe, you name it. But in real terms, they've gotten killed. That said, and I think I can't remember the article I wrote about this some time ago about the limits of QE. I mean, the Bank of Japan is now a top 10 holder of like every major company in Japan. So at some point, you actually will run out of things to buy. In fact, the ECB has had this problem all this year. They are running out of sovereign bonds to monetize. So they're continually having to go down the chain of quality. Now they're buying corporate bonds. They'll probably expand it. So instead of owning, say, 30% of German bonds, they can own 50 or 60%. So at some point, you're going to run out. And more importantly, the market will realize that you're running out of things to buy. So, yes, there are quantitative limits to how far you can take QE, and I expect that a lot of these central banks are going to have to try it because you take your foot off the gas pedal for a second and it's game over.
You mentioned both gold and silver. Can you touch base with us on what you see ahead for the gold-silver ratio in 2017, and what does that have to do with if people are still wanting to accumulate, what they should consider about the gold-silver ratio?
Right. I and others have talked about it ad nauseum. Because it's a never-ending topic, and I don't think of it in terms of a trading. I mean, look, there are reasons to own gold and reasons to own silver. I've always recommended to people, unless you feel strongly one way or the other, to own about 50%, which is where I am, and then from there say, well, why would I want to own one more than the other? But the fact is, if you are more inclined towards silver, it's clearly more undervalued. It's been, because it's a smaller, thinner market, it's been manipulated even more to the point that it's right now it's 70 to 1, and it's been as high as 80 or 90 to 1. I mean, historically it was 10 or 15 to 1 based on roughly the amount of silver that comes out of the ground relative to gold. And arguably, to me, there's no reason why it shouldn't be at that level, since the level of silver coming out to the gold is now more like 9-to-1. It's just as monetary as it's ever been before, and of course, nearly all the silver in the world that's been mined has been consumed. So it's a far tighter market than even gold is, and I expect as we saw it go down to maybe 35 or 40-to-1 in 2011, and so I can't imagine how it won't get to that level at least, and probably significantly lower in the coming years. The only argument for not going all in silver is the fact that it is, in fact, far more volatile than gold. So if someone's new to the sector and they're all in on silver, they're going to experience some wild swings that it's going to take some time getting used to.
You mentioned in passing the pressure in the Indian market that's added to the demand by the press for a cashless society there, an elimination of cash. The cashless society thing is something that has just been pressing on our minds and on the minds of our guests for some time now. But can you talk to us just briefly about what you see the real impacts are on the individual of the government and the banks pressing for a cashless society, and then where you see that playing out in India or other countries, and when you see it coming to the U.S.?
Right. Look, a cashless society, which was openly discussed in Davos last year when our markets were under pressure, and again, it goes back to for anyone who thinks that our governments or central banks are proactive in any way, they are not. They are 100% reactive. When markets fall, they do draconian things. Like in India, they do a cash ban because they realize that their economy is a lot weaker than it's portrayed to be, and the people are a lot more angry and frustrated, and so they do these things to gain control. Just like in 2008, we were in Congress, they were actively debating the confiscation of IRAs when the market was at its lows, and in Davos last year, when the market was plummeting, they were actively discussing the quote war on cash here in the United States. So we're always one crisis away from these things happening. Anytime you see an announcement like that in India, you realize that they are in crisis, or capital controls that were just announced. They announced today in China 6.8% GDP growth, which, by the way, is the lowest GDP growth number they've ever had, to put it in perspective. But this is at the same time they're instituting these massive capital controls because money is fleeing the country. So you can bet that no matter what India or China report, those actions are telling you that there's a desperation out there, just like the discussion of the war on cash that went on in this country last year and is probably going to be going on in many others in 2017, which I've written will be the year of money printing, draconian government actions, and monetary revolution. As for when it will happen here, I believe it will happen here as soon as we have any kind of crisis in the financial markets, whether it's stocks or bonds or, heck, even soaring gold. But soaring gold will probably coincide with one of those two markets falling. And they cannot hold everything up forever because there's just too much of a tsunami of these big factors we're talking about: the debt, the demographics, the deficits, the uncertainty of Trump, the political and social revolutions around the world. At some point, there's going to be a crisis here, let alone economically, since we theoretically are in one of the longest, quote, recoveries in U.S. history, and arguably the worst. At some point, that's going to have to come to an end soon. And, the numbers seem to tell me that end is going to be this year.
Why is a move to a cashless society a big deal for the individual? How does it really hit the individual person at home?
It's that simple. It's as simple as a government confiscation scheme. It's no different. It's different in nuance if the government was to, quote, confiscate IRAs or institute capital controls on them or force you into treasury bond investments or raise the tax rate on it or the penalties. A war on cash simply means it prevents you from having control over your assets. It gives the government the means to, at a whim, change the rules to take your money. They can institute one-time fees or assessments. They can institute negative interest rates. They can institute capital controls, limit how much money you can take out, how much money you can wire. They can even, I've heard, they've talked about having two different exchange rates, meaning if you actually had cash, it would be worth less than the, quote, cash in the bank, which is essentially what's going on in India. So again, it's a wealth confiscation scheme. And I assure you that anyone that's announcing anything like that, the odds that the value of that currency is about to fall precipitously is very high. I mean, you can guarantee the Indian rupee, which was already at about an all-time low when this started, has nowhere to go but down. And any country that institutes it, you are going to get your money stolen from you in one way, shape, or form. That is a guarantee.
So what can an individual do to protect themselves?
Well, obviously there's so many different aspects of life, but to protect. But when it comes to finances, you have to get your money out of the system. And now that if they're going to institute a war on cash, even cash may not be that valuable anymore. So, the only things that I know out there that have ever been able to do that are gold and silver. Of course, you now have Bitcoin. That's another story. It's another avenue for being able to hide your money, which has its own risks. But I've talked about at great length recently because I think it poses a major monetary threat to the powers that be and acts as a natural ally to gold and silver. But the fact is, other than those areas, financially, if you want to protect your assets, when you're talking about the end game of a fiat currency regime, which is ultimately hyperinflation, there's not many other places to hide.
Well, Andy, before we let you go, do you have any other thoughts for our viewers?
Yes, just keep in mind that the Trump honeymoon, Trumpflation, which was all based pretty much on propaganda and manipulating markets to make that propaganda seem real. Like that rising copper prices is somehow going to occur. We're going to have this big infrastructure building boom, as if like the last 10 years or 15 years of Chinese building, which couldn't goose the price of copper, is all of a sudden going to happen under Trump. All that's a mirage, and it just ended an hour ago. So he's going to actually have to run into this brick wall of reality, and so will the financial markets when they realize that nothing that he wants to do is viable, and anything that he tries to do is not going to help. So be wary, because the end of the honeymoon is over, and it's the new year upon us, the year of money printing, draconian government action, and monetary revolution.
And you've mentioned a number of your publications that, as you referenced during this interview, where can people find those directly? MilesFranklin.com.
Miles Franklin has been in business now 28 years, one of the nation's oldest bullion dealers. And I write every day for free, and you can also call us at 800-822-8080 or email me at ahoffman@milesfranklin.com.
And a reminder for all of our subscribers that if you go to our website, reluctantpreppers.com, sign up for our new free newsletter, you'll get full descriptions of all of our videos, which we've had to censor them from placing on YouTube due to the new advertiser-friendly guidelines, which is really censorship. And we also have expanded content from guest columnists. So make sure you sign up for the free newsletter on reluctantpreppers.com. Once again, Andy Hoffman, thank you so much for joining us again here on Reluctant Preppers.
Very welcome.